The three strike law dates back to the tough on crime movement of the 1980s and 90s in America, in which the criminal justice policies saw a large surge in support because of public fear over rising crime rates. The three strike law is a criminal justice enhancement that increased penalties for those who have been convicted with two previous crimes. Today we are going to break down and discuss the three strike law. I'm Laura.
I'm Jesse.
And I'm the Jericho.
And this is Reconfiguring Reality. So yeah, I did not know that the three strike law was like even a thing before 1994.
Actually, um, if this is correct, it's been a thing in some places since 1797.
Oh,
New York since 1797. Then the next one was, where was it? Texas in 1952, and then Maryland in 1975, but was amended in 94. Delaware in 73. Everything else was either 93, 94. There's a couple that was like 2000, or there's one that was 2005.
so
But
why
a
is
lot
it?
in
So why is it when you search the three strike law, you come up with 1994
California,
California?
because the majority of them started around 93, 94, but California is like the biggest example of it.
Mm-hmm.
It was two. So there's two reasons behind it. One, it's when the most number of states adopted it. So, and it's also to what it covered because there's been variations of the three strike law, but it's not neat. It wasn't always any law you commit or break rather is that's a strike and then three strikes you're out. It has to be of certain things or
So
pertain to certain things. So
how
in
like
'94 it focused on um changing specifically for like violent crimes, murder, rape, aggravated cases of like assault, robbery, sexual abuse, child abuse, different things where people are getting tired of this guy's doing this crime, and although this bad crime, it has like a ceiling level punishment of 2 years or whatever. So you have these like serial rapists and robbers and all these kind of things, and they just keep beating the system because they can only pin them down for like one crime, right? So now they're saying, okay, well, if it's aggravated, if you're going to keep doing it, then we're just going to enhance the sentence, right? We're not going to play around with this anymore.
so how it also works is, at least in California, after two strikes of, so if, like, let's say I was charged with a felony, a violent felony, the first time for carjacking, the second time robbery, even if I committed a non-violent felony my third time, I would get a longer sentence because of the fact it's a mandated it's what is it called? Oh, I just had it. A mandated sentence. So
Yeah.
even though, like, let's say my third crime, the max sentence usually is, let's say, 5 years. I'm just throwing a number out there. Because of how some of these laws are even written, I could be, even though it was a non-violent crime, because it's my third strike, 25 to life with no parole.
That's crazy.
Well, the idea is if you're committing multiple felonies, right, you're not making mistakes. You're not having a bad judgment call. You are committed to being a criminal.
Not necessarily, because now, if you owned a business, if either
Right.
of you two owned a business,
Uh-huh.
and let's say a person with a felony, a violent felony, applied, would you even bother to interview them?
Yeah.
Okay, so you're very few, actually. Like, I'm being serious. Like, I've even asked my employer, I've been asked a couple of my old employers, the reason why they have such a hard time is because as soon as they see a person has a criminal record, they don't even bother. And a lot of places are like that. And I understand it, but these, like, sometimes, like, let's say someone was convicted of a violent crime, a carjacking, and let's say someone physically got hurt. Let's do not do like worst case scenario murder or anything like that.
Right. There's assault involved.
Yeah, there was an assault involved. And they get out, they do their time, they paid whatever, let's say there was restitution, they were clear and free. They
Right. They
did
pay their debt
everything.
to society.
Part of the reason why sometimes people struggle and are repeat offenders is, let's say they have a family to feed and no one's hiring them. So let's say a drug dealer, they went to jail for a drug, they got caught dealing drugs, and they keep doing it because that's the only way they're able to support their family. And I'm not
Mm-hmm.
saying that's the right thing to do, but society has to change the way they look at some people. There are some people, outliers out there, that yes, they will just continue to commit crimes.
Okay.
There are certain people like that. It's just a fact of society and life.
Okay. So let me ask you a question. Um, if I told you to stick your hand in a campfire, would you?
Well, no, because I know it's going to burn me.
But how do you know that? Other people have done it, not got burned. You've grabbed something hot in your life and not burnt yourself by letting go quick enough.
Well,
Don't you believe it's possible to stick your hand in the fire and pull it out before you're actually burned?
well, it depends on what I've grabbed in my life before. If I've not gotten burned, because the temperature of the fire has to be equivalent to what I was not burned with to
Well, I'm
not
not
get
talking
burned.
about hypotheticals. I'm saying these things have happened to you, right? Would you stick your hand in a fire?
No. Common sense says I will get burned. It's why I don't touch the stove when it's hot.
And that's why you don't hire felons.
Explain.
So I'm not saying it's right or not right, but I'm saying is patterns don't just disappear. People don't change. Who they are at their core is who they are. When you talk about the Robin Hood syndrome of, oh my God, I'm stealing bread to feed my starving family. Okay, so you went through the process of doing all this, but you couldn't go to a food kitchen, or you couldn't beg on the side of the street because you couldn't lower yourself to do that, right? So there's always ways and alternatives. When people say I had no choice, this is the area I grew up in. I grew up in the ghetto. I grew up with crime and violence. I grew up with guns being shoved in my face and knives being swung at my vital organs. Okay, and despite this, it doesn't mean I go around stealing everything under the sun. It's a total bullshit excuse when someone whines and cries about how hard their life is. I get it. When you're down in the dumps, you just want to get out and you're desperate. But the thing is the reason people get those situations is because they've already made up their mind that this is what life is going to be. They gave up long before that decision to steal ever came into effect. When people talk about like systemic racism and all these other things that, contribute to impoverished people, there's impoverished people all over the world. Why do impoverished people in other countries face harsher threats of violence than we do and don't resort to the same crimes and things? Because they know they can get away with it here. The risk is worth it. Because if they sell that car they boosted, they don't just get to eat for a day, they get to eat without having to get a job, right? If you were successful, right, you stole, let's just say a mid-level car and you made 5 grand. 5 grand is life-changing money to someone on the street. But why don't they just magically have their life together? Why don't they use that money to go get a shower, fresh set of clothes, get out there? Why continue to steal?
Are you under the umbrella of people don't change at all? Therefore, the people that reform in prison, that's just an act?
I didn't say it was an act, but people don't change who they are, right?
Then how can you how
People
can
ev-
you how
people
can you
change all the time. You're not the same you were when you were 15
Acting
how
years
different is the
old.
same thing as changing, right?
okay,
So,
how do you explain people who convert religions?
because wanting faith is not the same thing as being Catholic or Christian, right? So, if I decided to be Muslim tomorrow, the driving force behind that isn't like they get cool headdress.
Okay, but what about all the
right?
drug addicts and the criminals and whatever that
Okay,
convert
those are
into
two very
religion?
separate things, though.
They're converting into a religion, but
Hmm.
that's not changing them?
No. Does God magically come down and wave a wand and solve your problems? If for
No.
those who believe in God, right? Okay, so what does religion do for you? Nothing. It does nothing material. It's not going to stop you from stealing. Your faith and your devotion, your commitment, the same willpower you put in that to honor your God or gods or your wife or your girlfriend or your partner or your dog or your kids, all the willpower that comes from you, right? So anybody who's a true believer in Christ and stuff like that, God's greatest gift wasn't life. God's greatest gift was the ability of choice. So when you choose to steal, no, again, I know a lot of people out there don't believe in any higher power, but for those who do, God is not going to give a damn that you were starving. He may feel for your plight, but the fact that you're doing wrong to others is it has nothing to do with it. It's a choice you made. Now, I know it sounds very cold, but the thing is, it's like people who cheat. People who've cheated on someone, it doesn't mean that they're going to cheat on every single person they ever with. No, but it means they have the capability.
But every human being has the capability of doing what another human being does.
Sure, we all do, but there are tendency and leanings towards things like sociopaths, right? Sociopaths can't change. Sociopaths cannot just suddenly start feeling emotion out of the blue. They will never feel it. That's what a sociopath is, right? But, someone who has physical handicap, somebody who is, a paraplegic, they're not just going to magically start walking because they believe in God or because they read some books or because they believe in themselves or the power of friendship. Those things aren't going to happen, right? So when you're talking about change, what you're really saying is they're trying to do better. But here's the thing. If someone had a felony, if you notice my answer was, I'm not going to not interview them. And then your response was, well, you're in the rare people most people wouldn't. You misunderstood. I didn't say I intended to hire them. I said I would not refuse them an interview because if I do that, then they can sue me if they could prove
N-
that I have never hired a felon before or have a tendency not to hire felons. By going through and simply denying them, along with many other people I've denied for the same position because I'm looking for the best fit, it keeps me from having to deal with litigation and BS. That's completely different motivation. Now, I'm not saying every person from prison is just a criminal to be hated and shrugged, but the thing is, you chose this path, right? We're not talking about a one-time offender. And 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 this is kind of the argument I like to make against it, right? I use the fire to make it a lighter argument, but let's change the dynamic. Let's say you met somebody who's a three-time strike offender for child molestation. Would you hire them to babysit your kids?
well, no, that's
Okay,
but
then
okay, but let's say it's a person who has assaulted a person. That has nothing to do with what your business is.
right. But this is what I'm saying though. You're showing a hypocrisy. If they're good enough to hire for your business, why aren't they good enough to protect your kids or watch over them? Because if they're so reformed and they've so changed, right? And I'm not saying it's because you're a bad person. What I'm trying to highlight is human beings have evolved an awareness to danger. When someone has proven themselves to be erratic and they cannot fit in society, if we don't give them every courtesy in the world and every opportunity and all the support in the world to help them change, right? Basically drag them kicking and screaming into being a good person, right? And they were like, well, I just went back into the system because nobody could give me a chance. Okay, do you know how many people grew up in times of actual racism? You know how many people grew up in times getting beaten and killed just because of the color of your skin or your beliefs in a certain God, right? Those people did not need a giant support group to make it in the world, to go to school, to push beyond the limitations and barricades in front of them, right? So to the idea that we suddenly have to bend a knee because you decided to make bad choices multiple times and now you're getting your shit together. Well, I congratulate you. Good job. You should get your shit together. But that doesn't mean that I'm just going to let down all my guards or most people, and just open you with open arms because you deserve a second chance. You had a second chance. You had a third chance.
But what I'm saying is if people would these people, the first offense, have already paid their debt back to society. They did their time in jail, they paid the restitution, and then in order they're thrown out and expected to not recommit crimes without being able to get a job because people are like, oh well, they're a felon, they're gonna sit there and rob me, they're gonna do this, they're gonna, you don't know that person, and you don't know if, let's say, someone, because technically vehicular manslaughter is a crime, it
Sure.
is a
Yeah, it is.
felony, it
Mm-hmm.
is, but it is not done purposefully. You accidentally got in a car accident and were charged because someone died.
Well, vehicular manslaughter is just the type of manslaughter. Whether it was intentional or not is irrelevant, like to the actual crime. Like if you purposely
But
run someone down
if
with your
some,
car, it's still vehicular manslaughter.
yeah, but if you're charged with manslaughter, it's different than murder. There's a reason why everybody is not charged with murder. There has to be specific things that it tick the boxes to get it to murder, and murder 2 and murder 3 and all this other kind of stuff. But if someone sits there and has a felony charge of manslaughter,
Mm-hmm.
and then they can't get a job, even though they've paid their debt to society, they've done their time, they've paid their restitution, but yet they can't find a job, they can't find a place to live, all this other kind of stuff. What are they supposed to do? They've already paid their debt to society. They went to jail, they went to prison, they paid back the families or whatever the judge says you had to do. And then they have no way of supporting themselves outside. They have no what.
Right, but you're
Let's say
talking
they're,
about a small, you're talking the 1% of the 1%. Plenty of people go to jail. Plenty of people are ordered to make payments. But that doesn't mean that they were going out there and
yeah,
being
and
a good
plenty of people
Samaritan.
sit there and get
And
arrested constantly for DUIs, but yet they're still allowed to get a fucking driver's license after 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 DUIs. They're still
I mean,
allowed to
people shouldn't
drive
be
a
getting
vehicle.
licenses as a whole. I agree that that whole driving system with license is all messed up. Like they give licenses to idiots all the time.
But what I'm saying is without a way to let them enter back into society without being further punished, of course there's of course they're going to find a way to support themselves, whether it be stealing or
Sure,
selling drugs or.
I agree. But my purpose though goes back to the other example we just used. So let's say first time offender, right? You have some
Mhm.
guy, let's say he's in his 40s, early 40s, or he's like 42. White male, slightly heavy set, balding, not particularly attractive or smart. Uh, First time offender, he molested 3 boys, ages 8 through 16. Would you let him watch your kids? First time offender, mind you. Paid his debt to society.
I missed the question. Say it again.
I said, would you let this first time offender who molested 3 kids, ages 8 through 16, boys, so homosexual molestation, and would you let him watch your kids?
How old is he?
42.
Probably not.
Okay.
I don't even let my family watch my kids, so it's
Right.
not
So
because of
here
what
we
his
go. This is
crime
what my
was.
point is, though. You can't you can't stand on a soapbox and say, help these people, and then be a hypocrite and don't help people. You can't have it both ways. Either they're dangerous and you don't, or we need to give them a second chance. This is the problem with socialism and ideas of let's be helpful to everyone. You're only really, you see, this is why people call socialism communism, is because in practice, on paper, it sounds great. Share everything, be nice to everybody, reform everybody, give everybody a chance. But in reality, when it comes to you and your stuff, you don't want to give up what you have because people are inherently selfish and greedy. And I don't mean just like they hoard money. I mean like their lives that matter more. Your children's lives matter more than your neighbor's lives, right? In true socialist behavior, everyone's life is equal. You would be willing
My
to take the
life and
bullet.
my children's life is no more important than anyone else's. Just because I wouldn't let someone watch my children when I don't let anyone watch my children has nothing to do with it. I have no issue with sitting there and making sure these people have a way to live so maybe they don't do crime again. Because,
Okay.
no offense, anybody who has been charged with molestation would not be able to get specific jobs because of parole. There's a reason why there's a sex registry. That's why certain people can't live in certain areas because it's around certain things.
Sure they can.
Because
That's only a minor statute imposed by the court. Usually, when sex offenders are put on a sex registry list, it's like parole. They have a certain time to be on the list. They have a certain requirement that they can't be near schools or other things for like 500 yards for like 5 years, and then that 5 years, it goes down to like 2 years of light probation, whether they can go. The thing is, once the big killer behind people like that when they're having tough is they have to announce it to everybody, no matter where they move to or whatever. They're never going to get away with it because they have to go to all their neighbors. They have, when they're interviewing for jobs, they have to fully disclose, I am a sex offender. And the thing is, whether they choose to get into the details of it is actually up to them. The employer can't say, well, did you molest kids? Did you sexually rape somebody? Like, what? They can't ask any of that. All they can say is the title. But the thing about it is that's the problem with the justice system. That's the problem where it gets kind of screwed up, is because people will look at that kind of stuff right off the bat, like you said, and immediately jump to conclusions. Like, I had a friend of mine, I won't disclose his name, but he and his wife are married. They have several kids together. They are more or less happily married and have been for a few years. Back when he was young, in his like early 20s, and they were together, one night they were in the middle of having sexual relations and they got into an argument. How that happens, I have no fucking clue. But while she was performing fellatio, this argument broke out. So, in frustration, he slapped her with his member. It wasn't like he knocked her out or gave her a black eye or hurt her in any sort of way. He did it to be insulting, right? She called the cops. He was put on a sex offender list, despite them still being married, despite her asking them to drop the charges and everything. But once he reported it, they can't ignore it. So he's forever stuck on a registry. Now, he doesn't have to tell his neighbors and all that stuff's expired, but it doesn't matter. Anybody can look him up, any employer can look him up. And he's suffered that same thing where he has to explain what happened and it's embarrassing and all that. But his stupid choice in that moment had set up his life for failure. You know what he doesn't do? Whine and cry about it. He thinks it's stupid that he couldn't have it removed and stuff, but he doesn't blame the system for holding him back. He blamed himself for doing something he knows he shouldn't.
Okay, now I have a question about the three strike law.
Sure.
right,
The third the third conviction, right, is what makes the escalated punishment or whatever. But do the three convictions have to be the same?
no.
Nope.
If the first two are a violent felony, it does not matter. You could sit there. And in California, selling drugs to a 17-year-old is considered a violent felony. So if someone got caught selling drugs to two 17-year-olds twice, and then let's say they did another non-violent one, it does not matter. As long as the first two are considered a violent felony, you could just sit there and do a non-violent felony and you can get 25 to life, which a felony could be, let's say you get pulled over with an ounce over what would be considered a misdemeanor, and then you're going to jail for 25 to life, depending on the state. And some states, judges do have the choice, or do have a little bit more wiggle room to not have to do a mandatory minimum. But most states, it's a mandatory minimum. The judges get no say
I
whatsoever.
thought I thought the first two felonies, or the first two felonies did not have to be violent.
They don't have to
Um,
be. It's any
well, it
felony.
says, see, what I saw was it has to be the three strike law enacted in California in 1994 to impose longer prison sentences on repeat offenders with multiple prior serious or violent felony convictions. Okay, so I guess
So
serious.
serious is
It depends
non-violent.
on.
Also, the 94 three strike law was changed. So in 2012, they changed it to California Proposition 36, and it redefined what three strikes was. And it was they called it the three strike law initiative, and it was changed to include different measures.
Yeah, it
Um,
allows people who had previously been sentenced to a three strike for a non-serious or non-violent felony to petition for resentencing.
Oh,
uh-huh.
okay.
But
But
you just get to petition doesn't mean you're gonna get it. But
there's
But
been
I
a
they
lot
was
released
of
a lot of people for that though during that time. Did
the
they?
other thing
criminal
is the three strike
serving
law has not been as effective as they hoped it would be either.
yeah, criminals serving a three strike enhancement are generally older, over 55, and make up 37% of servicing sentences over 20 years.
Oh,
So the
and
majority of people in prison on the three strike law are pretty damn close to being senior citizens.
Now, the thing a lot of people don't know either, and this is more of a issue with bigger states than smaller states, but um, just like the state government can ignore federal law to and make laws that actually contradict federal law, um, counties, because they're the ones that are judging the crimes, can do the same thing to a certain degree. So, for example, in San Francisco, they had changed the way they were processing the three strikes, and they decided they were no longer going to pursue third strike convictions against drug cases and nonviolent felonies. Because by how it's written, it's supposed to be against drug cases, nonviolent and violent felonies. Pretty much any felony or a drug conviction is going to stick your butt in this three strike program. But they're like, okay, there's way too many people, and this had a lot to do with the battle of legalization of drugs, right? Because so many people were taking drugs, quote unquote, illegally, but for what otherwise would be legal reasons in other areas. So if you had a debilitating disease like cancer or fibromyalgia or something like that, right? You may be self-medicating using marijuana, but because you didn't get a proper card for it, or at the time it wasn't legal, you would get a felony charge for possessing marijuana in some cases, or whatever drug you happen to be using. And then they would say if you had a certain amount, you would also have possession and with the intent to distribute. Even though if you never intended it was all for you, they're going to argue that, well, no one person needs that much. You know what I mean? So a lot of stuff like that was landing, well, pretty much non-criminals in jail.
Yeah, like a lot of states, like even before we passed our laws to legalize marijuana, they decriminalized it so you could carry a specific amount on you, or you could have a dugout or
Mm-hmm.
paraphernalia on you. The cops would just take it from you, but they could not charge you for it because it was under the decriminalized amount
Mm-hmm.
you can carry. So a lot of states are trying to do that to keep people who just like, because not every state has legalized marijuana or even medical marijuana. Some states are even doing like decriminalizing. I don't know if it's just mushrooms, but psychedelics
Yeah.
where they're not throwing people in jail for having magic mushrooms. They
Well,
just
if people
confiscate
want
them.
more information on the legalization of marijuana, go ahead and check out our video list, their podcast list, because I believe we touched base on that, did we not?
I believe so. I'd
A little
have to
bit, a little bit.
double check 100%.
But yeah, the big thing is what people don't, they always forget about laws. In theory, right? Like communism, laws are supposed to help us to frame society and punish the bad and help the good. The problem is that everything is a business at the end of the day, especially when you have an economy like ours, right? So when you're talking about a democracy and you're talking about the American economy and how we run things, um, money has to come from somewhere. So a lot of times with these laws, when they put them down, they're like, yeah, look at all these criminals we're sending to jail. Whether they deserve to be there or not or whatever is debatable. But once they're there, we have to pay for them to survive. They're getting three hots and a cot, even if it's a miserable lifetime in there, right? But that's costing us tons of money, right? Billions of dollars a year. So they will often change laws and lighten them and do other things and say, well, I guess these crimes really aren't that bad. Sure, they were smoking pot, but they didn't sell it to anybody and they whatever. Because they're like, who are they really harming, right? And so that's where they get into that minutia, and then laws get changed and lightened because they really are just trying to empty out the prisons because of crowding and other things, right? Same thing with like speeding, right? Cops want to write speeding tickets. That's important. But if you're having a crime problem in your city, you may tell your cops like just ease off on tickets. Like, right? Instead of the quota being we need to get so many so we get funding, it turns into we need to get so many so we look like we're giving out tickets, but otherwise we need you to go do your real job, right? Stopping gang violence, stopping break-ins, helping people, the stuff that cops are supposed to do. But if you're so overworked and understaffed, then you got to cut it from somewhere, right? Can't be everywhere all the time. So this is what you see with these kind of laws, is that on paper they seem great, but then they create more problems than they solve.
How many states have the three strike law?
Um, Arkansas, Arizona, California, Colorado, Connecticut, Delaware, Florida, Georgia, Indiana, Kansas, Louisiana, Maryland, Massachusetts, Montana, Nevada, New Jersey, New Mexico, New York, North Carolina, North Dakota, Pennsylvania, South Carolina, Tennessee, Texas, Utah, Vermont, Virginia, Washington, Wisconsin.
29. That is 29 states that have the third strike law. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, and the majority of them was 94, 95.
Not Hawaii.
Hawaii's not on the list.
I said,
Neither
yeah,
is
not. Do
yeah,
you know
neither.
why Hawaii is not on the list?
Why?
Because where are you going to build a prison on Hawaii? Right? They have very little midland resources to work with, and they have a massive drug problem. If they put a three-strike law in, they'd have to dedicate like 2 or 3 islands just to the prison to hold everybody.
What do you think they
It,
do with their criminals? Do they send them somewhere to the mainlands to get
I mean,
them?
they
it
still have prisons, but yeah, they'll send them off
it
off their
yeah,
island.
it depends. Just like that if usually a felony has a specific amount of time you need to like be considered a felony. If I remember correctly, like misdemeanors, you just go to jail. That's why like there's county jails, and it's up to a certain amount of time is what you're spending in a county jail. So like if your sentence is over like let's say 18 months, you would actually go to a prison, not a county jail. So jails are used for shorter time sentencing, holding people who need to go see a judge to get paroled or not paroled, bailed out, stuff like that. Where a prison is for a specific, your sentence is let's say 19 months. You actually have to go to a prison instead of a county jail,
This also
and
depends on your crime.
yeah, and so like even though I'm just using like Ted Bundy as an example, his crimes were committed in Colorado, Utah, Florida, and one other. I think he was in California for his prison sentence. So it's based off of your crime, how violent you are, if what if there's no state that can hold, or if there's no prison in your state that you're charged in to hold you, they'll move you to a more secure prison. So just because you committed a crime, like I think I think uh, Joe Judice was charged in New Jersey, and he was actually in another state for his prison sentence, even though his was a nonviolent one and whatever.
Huh.
So it depends on population, also, I believe.
So we think that the third strike law is effective.
Well, no, people still continue to repeat offend, so obviously
I
doesn't
think
work.
it's initially did its job. I think now people are realizing there's a lot more minutia to the legal system, whether that's good or bad. It creates problems areas, right? That if you don't have a concrete solution on what you're doing, right, you go to jail. This is the law. If you don't have that rigidity, then you lose effectiveness. But if you're too rigid, then when innocent people go to jail, whatever, it's nearly impossible to rectify the situation because the law is a law and that's it, right? Like, so you have to find a balance, and that's the eternal struggle of what we're talking about. Like, now that we're done playing devil's advocate, we go back to Jess's point, right? Helping people to get a second chance and have them be a productive, member of society. It goes kind of to that argument of, you know, if you went back in time, would you kill Hitler as a baby? Some people would say yes, some people would say no, because baby Hitler isn't Hitler yet. We may know what he did in one timeline, in one example, whatever, but he's still a child. He still has a whole life ahead of him as far as,
Baby Hitler
you
didn't
know,
do what adult Hitler did. Adult Hitler did what he did because of specific things and stuff
sure, he
like
was a
that.
struggling
So
artist on the street. He was abused and he took it out on the world, is basically what happened.
yeah, so but also sit there and say things like that is you would disrupt the whole timeline of the rest of the world. So you may take out Hitler, but who's to say taking out Hitler doesn't sit there and set some bigger monster loose?
Mm-hmm.
Stuff like that. Because what is it? The butterfly effect. If a butterfly flaps its wings in New York, does a
Well, it all
tsunami
depends
hit in
on how
Japan?
time actually is, right? We don't know how it
Well, yeah.
works.
But
But
I'm just saying, like, of course, like, I've been asked that question before, and I'm like, well, it's not guaranteed that because it wasn't just Hitler. It was Hitler and his whole little circle of fucking numbnuts.
well, the argument is always right. You better the demon you know than the one you don't.
Yeah, because
And
you don't know what'll happen if baby Hitler dies, and you don't know what happens.
sure, my point in this is just that the idea is we want to try to believe in the goodness of humanity, in the inherent goodness within people, but it's just not a thing. It's not that people don't have the potential for good within them, but we've seen it time and time again. You're a product of your environment, right? Now, do good people come out of bad situations? Sure, but that's the minority. Most of the time, people do what they do to get by, right? If they have the opportunity to be good, maybe they take it, maybe they don't. But if all around them says, I have to be a thug, I have to be this in order to survive, their first inclination isn't, I'm going to swim upriver, right? They're going to go with the flow and they're going to have the options that's available to them. And to Jess's point, if we never give them the option, they're just going to keep going with the flow. They're going to go right back into what they were doing because no one ever gave them the opportunity to get off that path, right?
Yeah, and there are some places who like there are some people who will strictly only hire felons to try and give them that opportunity. And I'm not saying every single person, if you give them that opportunity, it's going to change their life. But the ones that it does help has proven that some people if given a second chance will sit there and do become proper members of society.
Sure.
Not everybody, but that's like saying, well, there's no point in doing drug rehabs and stuff like that because people sit there and they're just going to go back to using drugs. Some people will, some people won't. It's just like people with mental illnesses. Some people will sit there and take their medications and be productive members of society. Some people won't. This, that, and other things. It
Well, you
it's a
make a strong
crapshoot.
point, but I think you kind of prove my point by supporting your own. And that is in the scenario where you say some will, some won't, when you're dealing with violent offenders, you're running a huge risk for the some won't, right? So if you're putting a violent person within reach of yourself and your family, you never know what you're dealing with. Like my friend's work used to hire almost exclusively felons because they needed a second chance and they worked cheap. And they did this for years without any real incident. Like some guys might steal, they might get caught, they might break parole, they might go back to jail, whatever. But they didn't do anything that would just outright be like, okay, you know, that we shouldn't hire felons. But eventually, felon stole the vehicle, the company vehicle he was using, robbed a bank, kidnapped a teller, raped her, and because he was stupid, he made her write him a check because she didn't have much money on her. And so he went to cash the check and they caught him because he's stupid. But my point is though is that right, like they gave that guy a second chance, a chance to be a member of society. He had a steady job, and he decided to just go off and because he could. right? So that's why people don't hire felons, because the risk is too great. If because when you deal with percentages of how many people actually reform and how many people don't get in trouble, and I mean that's kind of on the extreme side, but even if it's just someone who's quits a job or doesn't take it seriously or screws around and gets themselves thrown back into jail because they broke parole for getting in a fight or carrying a gun or drinking or doing any of the things that can get you violated for parole, as an employer, you're not just risking, is this person going to go crazy, but you're risking, are they going to be on time? Are they going to have interpersonal issues? Are they going to be able to work with people without getting in fights or doing whatever, right? There's so much more drama and things that come with it. And if they spent 3 months training this guy and then he goes wackadoo and now they got to fire him, they have to spend another 3 months training somebody, right? Those are all things employers have to consider. So why hire the stupid wet behind the ears kid who's 18 over the felon? Because kids are impressionable. You can teach them to do things the way you want them to do. They don't have all these opinionated about things, and they don't have all this drama, PTSD, and God knows what else from being in prison.
That you know of.
I mean, is it possible? Yes, but we're talking percentages, right? It- could I have married a psycho killer? I sure could have, but what's the percentage of that happening, right? So that's what we're talking about. In the realm of reality, do I fear getting hit by lightning 3 times when I walk outside my house? Of course not. It's ridiculous. The percentage is so infinitesimally low. You know, I'd be more famous if they caught it on video or survived it than I have to fear it. But if I live in a high crime area, do I leave my doors unlocked at night? No, that's just stupid because now I'm running a risk that's too high, right? So that's what I'm getting at is that I agree people need a chance, and when you're a felon and things like that, it's really hard. Veterans have a lot of hard time in the same way, but again, from the other side, playing devil's advocate, you don't want people watching your kids, whether they're felons or not, right? And that bias that you have prevents people from getting a job, prevents people from getting an opportunity. Whether you see it that way or not, it doesn't matter because that's the truth of the scenario. So just like you don't want people watching your kids, they don't want to hire felons.
That's gonna have to be it.
Like, subscribe, comment, yada yada yada, all that good
Do you
jazz.
agree with this or disagree? Tune on in, leave a comment, let us know.
All right, guys. Thanks for being here. We'll see you next time.
Bye.